Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Vision is a really big deal to a leader. We talk about it all the time, but do we really think about it outside of work? Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And we're going to continue this conversation we've been having on Winning Begins at Home. I got a new book coming out just in a few days now, June 11th. If you've not pre-ordered yet, I hope you'll do that. But today, Mark, we want to talk about what it means to have a vision outside of work. And I'm excited to continue this conversation with you. It's going to be good when we think about really what's going on.
Yeah.
In a non-work life.
Yeah. I think we may have talked about this on a previous episode. I mean, you and I both had coaches that have influenced us throughout our lifetime. And I had a life coach 20 years ago or so that made me think about what I wanted to be true in 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's probably another story for another episode.
But you're getting closer though, right?
The reason, well, no, I'll keep updating it.
Yeah.
I just updated my 30-year plan.
Yeah, I love that.
But the reason it comes to mind right here is that 90% of my 30-year plan has nothing to do with work.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And yet, how many of us, we spend all this time planning at work? We talk to executives everywhere. And they understand we got to have some time to think.
Mm-hmm.
We talk to them. Sometimes they get in the quicksand and they forget to do that. But most of them understand. If I don't have vision, my people aren't going to. I always say if the vision is fuzzy to the leader, it gets blurry to all the people who are following the leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think vision can get real fuzzy when we get outside of work. Sometimes we just check it, I'm out, I'm going home, I'm going to get some rest, I'm going to pull,
Yeah, we leave our brain at work.
We leave our brain
actually.
at work, and
we
don't
don't bring
give a
it
lot of
home.
thought to it. And yet, if I like the way you said that, if your plan is 90%, I mean, when it's all said and done, I think that's going to matter maybe more than anything that you do at work. And I know our work's going to be important. We're going to talk about how do we even think about balance there in some future episodes here. But this is a big deal for us to give some thought to it. And so I want us to dive into that a little bit today.
That's good. Where do you want to go first?
Okay, so we said yesterday we're talking about the whole blueprint mindset. My wife wanted to build a house, and she's got the thing. And we had a pretty good idea, but you mentioned the coach there. We actually had an architect who had to put some elevations on the front and tell us where the plugs were. She actually knew where the plugs were going to go, but they had the thermostat goes here. There's some things we didn't really understand. So we needed a little outside help, but she had a really pretty good vision of what we wanted in that home. And I think the same thing can happen when we think about our family. We can have a what's called a prerequisite. Now, a lot of people are about to graduate here probably the next few days, and they've got these degrees, and the ones that are graduating are probably finishing courses in 401 and all that. We started out, remember, in 101. I actually started out in remedial in a couple of them. But there were some prerequisites to be able to get into those degrees along the way. There's some things you have to do before. And I've got a couple of fundamentals I want to give our listeners here over the next few days. But before we do, I think there's a couple of prerequisites. And so I want to spend a little time today on this first one. Let's define what. That's what I say there. We want to define what. Tomorrow we're going to talk about deciding why. We'll dive into that. But this idea of defining what kind of family you want, I think that's where it starts. And so go all the way back. I mean, you've been married a while now.
Mm-hmm.
I have too. When you think about, why you wanted to have something going on outside of work, what comes to mind? I mean, you go all the way back to even the kind of family you wanted to have. Was there any point where you said, okay, this is what we're after here?
Yeah, well, I needed this book 40 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Because I started probably with some vague generalities.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd have brought the same level of thinking and discipline to work that I applied in my marriage in those early years,
Yeah.
I might have been fired.
Yeah.
And so it was more of a...
Thankfully, Donna didn't fire you.
Well,
right?
yeah, right. It was more of a progressive revelation for me as I began to think about the relationship I wanted and the influence that I wanted, and ultimately the character traits that I wanted to try and instill in our children.
Yeah.
But it was not as planful in the early days.
Well, and I think the same thing. I mean, you go all the way back and we've been around for a while, but it really was. It was. I like the way you said it was kind of progressive revelation. It was like you start watching this family, and they seem like they've got it, kind of together a little more than this family does, or whatever. And we know when you don't have things good at home, it can be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually an old Bible verse that says how good and pleasant it is when we live together in unity. Well, we know if we don't live, and we've all been there, right? We've all been in places where it wasn't good and it wasn't pleasant because we weren't all on the same page. We didn't even have really any thought to what we were trying to do. And yet I think it is true. There's nothing better than home when it's working the way it's supposed to. And so I'm excited about the leader who's listening going, you know what? I haven't really given a lot of thought. I'm kind of like we were back in the day, and we're just, I felt like I was making it up as I was going for a while. And yet I knew I wanted to have a family. I thought this would be great to have some, people to live with and enjoy life with. And then kids start coming along, and you really do feel like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And so I think this idea of having a definition of what you want, I would say to the listener today, if you're listening, what is it that you want outside of work? And this, we mentioned this a couple of days ago. You might not even be married, or you may not have any kids, but all of us have something going on outside of work. What do you want to be true about your life when you leave the office?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you leave the office, you may be working at home all the time. And
right.
Is there a separation between, you're going out of the home office and you
right.
leave that, when you walk out that door, what do you want to be true about your life? And I think that vision is a big deal.
All right. So let me flip it back to you. You probably had more clarity than I did. What did you want in your home, in your life outside of work?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things when I look back. I think I really wanted a marriage that worked. I thought that was important. That was important to me. And I know I've seen when it has worked, how good it can be. When it doesn't work, how hard it is for people. And a lot of people can relate to that. We know a lot of people who are listening, your parents, if it worked, it was probably a lot easier than it was if it didn't work. I mean, I've had people tell me it was so hard because my parents, it didn't work out. And
so then you didn't really have a role model.
They didn't have anything to look up to. Exactly right. And so I wanted that part of my life to work. I just thought it would be so much better to have that going on when I leave work. I really didn't want to be by myself. And I know a lot of people choose to do that, and that's great, but that just wasn't what I wanted. But it helped me to know what I wanted to, like, okay, I'm going to pursue this kind of relationship. And then we wanted to have some kids, and we, that was hard for a while. We were trying to have some kids, struggled for a little while to have children, but then, the girls started coming along, and once that happened, it was another one. I used the word seasons yesterday, but that season of parenting, it shifted our focus again. And I thought, okay, I've got to give a little thought to this, because I wanted those kids. There's some things I wanted there. I wanted them to feel loved, and I wanted them to feel supported, and I wanted them to know values, and all that kind of stuff. I wanted some responsible. We all hope they'll end up be responsible. Out there, make some impact. And so I remember thinking those things, and yet I'll just say from the get-go, it's so hard to try to get this right, especially if you don't have a thought to what you're trying to do. So that's where I would say we started. And I would encourage every leader today who's listening to say, okay, let me give a little thought to this. If you haven't, especially, go back to what we're talking about, you renovating those houses. I think everybody listening probably has a place or two that they need to renovate what's going on outside of work, even if it's not to do with your family. And so I would just encourage them today to spend some time on that vision and say, maybe even take an hour, get yourself a legal pad. That's what happens in the book here. And the guy pulls it out and just says, okay, and he makes a list. And it's amazing what happens when we start saying, this is what I'm looking for. I think we're much more likely to find it.
Much more likely. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, so that's it. If you're listening today, I hope you will take some time and really do a little bit. Maybe it'll be hard work. You may go, this is not comfortable thinking about this, but I think you got a really lot better shot of not having regret down the road if you have a vision when you start out. We always say leaders take people from here to there. I think family leaders also have an opportunity to get to a better place if they can start with that vision. So we hope you'll do that today. All right, join us tomorrow. We'll continue. I got prerequisite number 2. We'll jump into our fundamentals here toward the end of the week, and we'll continue this conversation. Winning really does, I believe, begin at home. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.